Let's introduce our first speaker. She's the Global Legal Solutions Executive from E&Y Law. Please welcome Rebecca Thorkildsen.
Hello, everyone. I wasn't sure that I was going to get music, but it's quite a welcome, actually. So after that dynamic talk, of course, I get to talk about something really, really fun. Contract migration. I know it's something that everybody loves, but we need to keep that Agiloft brand going and the customer satisfaction high. And what that means is that you need a good contract migration, because I think everybody knows the moment that you introduce a new system, and somebody goes to look for the contract that they need to find and they can't find it, what's wrong? System's bad. So we know that we need to migrate. Now, a lot of you are already Agiloft users, and you might have already gone through the pain, but nonetheless, I still meet plenty of organizations who decide we're going to roll out and not move the contracts in because it's quite painful. Or maybe they're moving contracts in tranches, or maybe there's a merger, an acquisition, and you have a new group to move in. So contract migration is almost always on the horizon for many organizations. So what I'd like to do is actually share some lessons from the trench about contract migrations, share some strategies that might give you ideas to help with yours, and of course set expectations, because too often I think organizations go into the migration process and really think this is going to be easy, and they don't recognize that we really need to pay some time and attention and put some human effort to this. So I want to talk about really two approaches. One I think is probably really familiar, but one is taking advantage of emerging technologies, the AI that promises automated extraction. And I want to share a little bit about the realities there. So let's talk about extract, transform, and load, because this is the one that most people are familiar with. And the idea here is that you have a legacy system, you've stored contracts there. At some point, individuals in your organization have probably entered data about the contracts, such as what business unit is the contract associated with. And there might actually be metrics associated with that contract, such as how long did it take us to get through the process? Though more often than not, that part's not there. That's why you bought Agiloft, right? But the most important part about extract, transform, and load is that you're going to get to retain that legacy data. And that may or may not be a good thing, depending on the quality of the data and how well others in the organization have used the system and actually populated it consistently. But nonetheless, it is important, particularly if you need some sort of history or there are groups of documents together, maybe they've been amended and you want to retain that amended contract with the original, for example. But the trick with, or the problem with extract, transform, and load, and I'm going to call it ETL for short, is that when you're designing a new system, you're often thinking about all the new things you'd like to do and probably couldn't do with the old system. So that means you're designing new fields. Those fields are not going to have data in the old system, and you'd like to maybe get that data into the system if you can do it. So that's where we come to the automated extraction piece. Traditionally, to populate those old fields, the only way to do it is to have a human being sit down at a keyboard and actually open that contract, review it, and pull the data out, and voila, you have the data that you need. But there is an emerging class of tools for automated extraction. And I say emerging, that might not be exactly true, because they actually have been around for a while. So I get to share with you the realities of those. But these tools can actually help improve the speed and efficiency of actually going through large batches of contracts to pull out data and actually populate those structured data points that you want to pull into your new Agiloft system. But let's talk about the flip side to this is that if you're doing a straight extraction with a tool, you're not getting that legacy data. And so if your contract doesn't say the business unit that is associated with the contract, you're not going to have that information in the new system. So it is a little bit of a conundrum, because neither tool or neither approaches are foolproof. You're going to have, data in one that you wish, and missing data in one that you wish you had, and same with the other method. So there is the opportunity to mix them, but there's challenges in that too. And so I'll walk you through a strategy for how you can mix the approaches. So let me start with some of the common challenges of extract, transform, load, and give you some ideas for how you might be able to work with that data. So one of the most important and valuable benefits of actually pulling data out of a legacy system is particularly if people have loaded the contracts into those legacy systems and you know which documents are related, because that is a very time-consuming effort to build those families and recreate those linkages. So one of the most important things you need to do when you're extracting data from one of your legacy systems is to try to take advantage of the data that's already in that system that builds those relationships or linkages. If you can't do it, there's other ways that you can move stuff out by pulling either the names of the files, using the fields such as the name of the client, the type of contract, things that might already be there. But the idea is that you eventually want to build some sort of data set that's going to enable you to A, find that document again when you import it into the system, and B, link it back up to the data that you've exported from the legacy system. So a lot of prior thought before you start exporting data goes a long way. Another common challenge, particularly with organizations that have CLM systems in silos. So sales might have built their own system to store all their sales agreements, and your purchasing function might have some documents in Ariba. And gosh, no, those lawyers really like to keep the contracts in their file shares and email boxes. So you may find out that you have contracts all over the place. And, a big goal is we are now building that single source of truth with the Agiloft system. So we want to start pulling all of these documents together, and we'd like to use the data from them. But gosh darn it, we find out we have multiple copies of the documents across systems. So that's another problem with the ETL, is when you start pulling that data together into one single repository, you are going to find duplicates. They might be renamed differently, so that makes it really challenging. One of the things that we've started to play around with are, I don't know how many have ever worked or know anything about document review in the litigation space, but a big part of that process is removing duplicates from that batch. So to the extent that your litigation team or anybody in e-discovery has a document review tool in-house, that's one way that you can actually get through that. Now, some of the AI tools I'm going to talk about also do deduplication, but a lot of them just look for matches of the file name. So we all know people like to name files differently, so those are somewhat less reliable. And then another trick of the trade, kind of low tech, but it works, and it's actually quicker than trying to clean up the data within that legacy data system. Once you export the data, good old Excel, you can search, and you can look for, the eyeball is amazing at what it can find with data anomalies. So you start to sort and search on different date fields, and you put that column with the date next to the type of some type of field that's related. So for example, something that we recently found with a client we're working for, they had an expiration date, and yet when you laid the column right next to whether or not the contract was auto-renew, we saw a lot of contracts that said, yes, auto-renew, and they had an expiration date. So right away, that gives you some pause and says, we might have some cleanup to do here. So some strategies, just playing around with the data in Excel can help you identify some of those data inconsistencies. And then ultimately, you can do a lot of update right in Excel. Again, low tech, but I hate to say it, sometimes that is the fastest way. So you can do a lot of cleanup. But that's this ETL, this is the way that people have done it for years. So let me get to the exciting stuff, which is really the automated extraction. Unfortunately, TED Talk style is supposed to be uplifting, but what I'm really going to do is I'm actually going to share some of the realities of automated extraction, because what I don't want anyone to do is to go into this thinking that automated extraction is the sole answer to a data migration. It would be wonderful if it is. Maybe it will get there someday. When you start pulling these documents together, one of the first things you're going to have problem with is, again, that duplicate data, a data set where you have things that aren't contracts. Maybe you accidentally ended up with a group of invoices or a lot of emails that were saved to PDF. AI, when it starts to do data extraction, not going to work real well when it's not a contract and it's not finding what you want. Now, some of the tools out there are better than others. They can identify those problems. But really, there's a lot of value in going through that document set first and actually doing some document classification, looking to see if you can actually get some of the garbage out of that. Find those duplicates, get the non-contracts out. You may even want to go through and look for things that, contracts that aren't signed, maybe you don't want those in there. So there's a lot of value in that cleanup of the document set itself. A couple other points are, there are certain types of data that the AI is just really not that good at pulling out of the contract. So this is a go into it with your eyes wide open type of talk. So everybody knows and is familiar with the expiration clause. And you want to have an expiration date in your contract management system. That's one of the most important things. You know, we want a notification right before the contract expires so we can decide whether or not we want to renew. But what happens if your clause says 5 years from the effective date? AI might be able to find the language that says 5 years from the effective date, might be able to find the effective date if it's actually typed into the contract. But if that data point's not there, a lot of tools aren't going to be able to pull that out of the system. So you actually need a way to actually get to that interpretation. So you can either build a business rule, and Agiloft can help you do that, or you need a human being to actually read the fact that it's 5 years from expiration and key it in. And the nice thing about some of the AI is that some of the tools out there, they give you the ability to data key in. You can read the text and you can data key what that value is. But just be aware that sometimes things that seem like it should be easy might not be as easy as you think. Let me give you another example. And another one that seems really easy is, let's pull out the address and phone number of the parties. The problem is that in a lot of contracts, that information is in a signature block. The AI can definitely find an address. It can tell that it's an address. But if you're working on different contract forms, sometimes the address of the party you want is on the left, sometimes it's on the right, and it's not really obvious to the AI that this is the address of the person from our company that signed this, and this is the address of the person on the other side. So AI sometimes has, I call it proximity and association, but sometimes if there's not words very close by to really indicate what those words refer to, the system has a hard time saying, this is the address for party A and this is the address for party B. Now, when it's written out in the text block of the contract, the systems do better with that. So it's just something to think about. You can't obviously change the form agreements that your legacy contracts are on, but it's something to think about as you're developing your Agiloft system or any new form agreements, that there are certain things you can sort of think about. If we're going to use this type of system in the future to populate new contracts, maybe we can set up our form agreements to pull it out more easily. Or maybe we can set up our fields in a way where we can capture the data that is extractable so that in the future we can figure out the structured data points that we need. I'm going to sort of gloss over the rest of them. We'll be sharing the presentation. But the bottom line is that there are challenges on both sides. So one of the things that you can do as an organization is you can actually mix and match both sets of data migration strategies. But again, prior planning is probably the most important aspect of being able to mix both results. So I mentioned with ETL that the important thing is as soon as you export the data from your legacy systems, you need to have a unique identifier that says, here's a record and here's the contracts and documents associated with that. Now, once you pull the data out of your legacy system and you go through the cleanup, the transformation, anything that you need to do to prepare that data to get it into the Agiloft system, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to take those contracts that you've pulled out and you're going to run them through your AI to pull out any new data that you're looking for. The real trick is to match those two sets of data back up. So what that means is that contract that has come out, you need to be able to reassemble a unique identifier either from the name of the contract, the file type, or some other data that can be found within that contract so that you can reassociate and relink that data from the extraction back to the legacy data. So there's a fair amount of work that goes into trying to figure out exactly how it's going to work. It's not magic. I wish it was. I'd love to wave the magic wand. Again, a lot of planning goes a long way. So final lessons. Be prepared. Migration is not perfect, but having that data there is better than not having it at all. I think most organizations would say they get a lot more value out of their systems when you can search for those legacy documents, when you can use the features like grouping all of the contracts together and seeing those families. Don't underestimate the importance of cleaning up the document set in addition to the data set. So you don't want to migrate in a bunch of non-contracts, non-executed, things that have already been expired. Get rid of them, because if you're going to spend the time doing any cleanup, clean up only the documents that matter. Human intervention doesn't go away. So I'm going to stop there. I see I'm out of time. But that's the last. You can read the rest of the lessons, and I hope you got a couple of tidbits that were helpful.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause for Rebecca. Rebecca, thank you.